Coming up, the Libertarian wing of the Tory party are a group of about 60 MPs who gravitate around the so-called COVID recovery group, the CRG. Their schtick is to push for the unfettered rights of the individual, no matter if this means taking no responsibility for harm caused to others. This is Thatcher's mantra of "there's no such thing as society" writ large. But where are these self-styled libertarians, these anti-science pundits, these crusaders for freedom, when it comes to restrictions on our rights to protest, our freedom of movement to live and work in 27 other countries, and the curtailment of freedoms under proposed changes to the Human Rights Act? Hidden from view, they can only be found by sniffing out the stench of their hypocrisy. Stay tuned for more details. If you enjoy the channel, please hit like, subscribe and hit the bell for notifications of new videos. Members of the CRG are conspicuous by their ignorance of science and lack of medical knowledge. They dismiss face masks. They promote herd immunity, and they argue that the health of the economy should take precedence over the death of the old and vulnerable. They routinely question official statistics on case numbers and fatalities. They pour scorn on scientific advice, and they've even started a hate campaign against Chief Medical Officer Chris Whitty recently after he gave expert advice that was at odds with Bozo's stated policy of doing sod all in the face of over 100,000 new cases of COVID daily. These UKIP Tory rebels spout on about slippery slopes, knee-jerk emergency measures and warn of permanent loss of liberty. And of course I'm the first to agree that we can't trust this government more than Owen Paterson with a brown envelope. But regular viewers will know I'm fond of quoting John Stuart Mill, the original libertarian politician and philosopher, who once wrote that the only purpose for which power can be rightfully exercised over any member of a civilised community is to prevent harm to others. And in the context of a pandemic that has taken around 150,000 souls in the UK, it's pretty clear that some temporary measures that impact on personal liberty can be justified to prevent harm to others. And that's why I think it's wrong to characterise these Tory MPs on the right of their party as freedom-loving. True, they like to promote certain limited sorts of freedom, the freedom for people just like themselves to do what they want without taking any responsibility for the harm caused to the rest of us plebs. But there are a lot of freedoms they have precious little interest in. Freedom from poverty, freedom from modern slavery, freedom of the right to seek asylum, freedom of assembly and protest, freedom of the courts, the freedom of whistleblowers and journalists to call out government misconduct. Alexander Boris de Pfeffel Johnson and his mediocre cabal are systematically dismantling our freedoms in many areas of civic life, and yet these so-called libertarians remain supportive of government measures to trash the Human Rights Act, to disenfranchise citizens without a photo ID, to criminalise all protests, to get rid of judicial review, to remove legal protection from whistleblowers, and to disempower the Electoral Commission. The CRG's roughly 60 members constitute a small minority of the 365 Tory MPs, but what they lack in numbers, they make up for in influence. Influence which is amplified by Murdoch's papers and the rest of the right-wing press. The COVID response group's chair is Mark Harper, a former chief whip who was in charge of immigration when the Go Home vans provoked public outrage, and of disability when the DWP brought in the punitive PIP, personal independence payment, reforms. And it gets worse. The vice chair is homophobic climate change denier Steve Baker, the self-styled hard man of Brexit and former chair of the swivel-eyed Brexiteer gang, the ERG. Baker is an evangelical Christian, staunch libertarian and a lockdown skeptic who has links to a number of hard-right groups and a history of accepting dodgy donations from groups like the ultra-conservative American Principles in Action. They style themselves as America's top defender of the family and are known for their anti-LGBT and pro-life agenda. He also has links with the American Liberty Fund, an anti-environmental pro-corporate lobby group. According to the MP's Register of Interests, Baker has been paid thousands of pounds by the arms industry while working as an MP and lobbying on their behalf. And he even ran an all-party group which promoted the industry whilst in receipt of their funds. Owen Paterson-esque, yet he remains in Parliament. Go figure. An equally vociferous opponent to COVID restrictions is Sir Graham Brady, the chair of the king-making 1922 committee and collector, so far, of an estimated half-dozen letters expressing no confidence in Bozo the Killer Clown. In November, Brady called lockdowns evil and likened the UK to a totalitarian state. And then there's Charles Walker, vice chair of the 1922 committee and another Tory heavyweight, who has accused Sage of trying to ramp up the fear factor and suggested we're drifting into an authoritarian coercive state. This small factional cult of libertarians seem to have a disproportionate impact on the direction of government policy, with our weak, procrastinating and indecisive Prime Minister increasingly capitulating to their demands to ignore the science and to allow the pandemic to cull the elderly and vulnerable from our population. The ultimate expression of freedom without responsibility.